He didn't sign in. He didn't sign in.
That's good.
The procedure, like, do these things get?
Someone's got some echo.
Oh, Tim is trying to get.
Should be
They
somebody
said there was nobody at the
around
next
30.
So I'll just run down again.
Maybe went to the restroom. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think we just are waiting for Fred.
Sorry.
Did you see it?
Okay, yeah,
Mary Ann just took care of it, I
I understand. We just need Fred to have our form so we can.
Oh, no. Yeah, we don't have quorum.
Yep. What?
I'm down.
think. We should have sent.
He's going to open the door.
Okay.
Should have somebody down there.
How you design school best. Outside of the SMC on the second floor. I think we can do is see if that's a permanent block or what. It's beautiful. It's
Great.
It's a nice thing. It's actually. It's because I'm not.
His team. He just, Fred just went down.
Okay. It is.
Should we know it? Are board members supposed to learn the fight song?
I'm actually. Son.
I don't. This is what I'm saying. I feel a little bit like I need to learn this.
You want to sing it for us while we wait?
Well, you know,
I think he's limited himself to Alice Cooper.
I can sing Alice Cooper, that's about it.
Thank you.
All right. Look, Tim.
Not making me to come.
Okay, our first, we are resuming the committee of the whole meeting, and our next order of business is visits for comments. Do we have any signed
None
up?
for tonight.
We have none signed up for visitor comments. Thank you.
Mhm.
Our next order of business is I move to approve the May 12th, 2022 Committee of the Whole minutes as presented. Are there any corrections, adjustments that need to be made? Okay, may I please have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Right? Anyone opposed? The minutes are approved. Our next section will cover the finance area, and I will turn it over to Dr. Johnson.
We go to the echo there.
All
Is that a thumbs up?
Okay.
Oh, okay, great. We have a number of finance items here, 6 total, none of which have large kind of presentations. Hopefully the information that the board might have questions about is in the memo there, but for a brief intro, Mr. Dorr is here. The first item is property casualty liability and workers' compensation insurance renewal for the upcoming school year. So Cindy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Again, this is the annual renewal for property casualty liability and workers' compensation. Tonight with us, we have Debbie Salinas, who's the account executive with Alliant, who will be answering any questions that we have, or I'll answer some. Just a very quick overview. Over last year, we had 7.15% increase, or $45,353. A couple of things that caused that has been property. We also had a student accident catastrophe, which was something we didn't get billed for last year, so it's sort of a gift. This year we were billed for. And then cybersecurity, as we know, that has been on the rise, so that has also gone up. So with that, I will turn that over for any questions to the board.
Mr. Arkin.
Yes. Good evening. Nice to see you, Kathy. To let you know, I'm in the business, so I have some specific questions that I wanted to ask. I think my biggest concern and something we need to talk about as a district is the insurance is just a part of our overall expense. And we have I think it comes out of the tort fund. It's a fund that we use to pay claims. And so the insurance renewal, I think, is good. I think 7.15 is on the low end of where the market is today. So I think that Alliant has done a very good job. So, but the questions I have, and I posed them in an email, is, I think some of this has to be fine tuned, but I also, moreover, we need to take an overall approach and look at our property casualty risk. And that includes our losses, because this very well could be a very small portion of what we're actually paying out because of claims. So we need to take a look at our claim data. We need to disaggregate it by year, by types of claims, by lines of coverage, and take a good hard look at it so we know where we're at, and then talk about loss control, risk management, what we can do to eliminate claims. And I will say that many moons ago, the first call I ever made in the insurance business with my father was to a very large manufacturer, and the CEO asked him point blank. He says, "We need to save money. You need to cut the premiums." And my dad looked at me. He said, "I understand that." He said, "But if you really want to save money, true money, don't have claims." All right. And I think that's a perspective we need to look at. So the first after, and I know it's not gonna happen tonight, but we need to start looking at claims and where they're coming from, what their magnitude, do we have any kinds of problems, are there frequency problems, are there severity problems? Because we just don't know, because we haven't seen this before. But, so one of the questions I had was, is our deductible is $10,000 on property? We got a huge value increase. So our values went up $19 million. And that's based on an insurance company's valuation. We ought to be controlling that valuation, and whether, I don't know if we've ever had a replacement valuation done for the building.
Yeah.
Okay, and that could be indexed year after year after year, so that we know that we're where we need to be. Because insurance companies have two ways to basically increase price. One is to increase value and the other is to increase rate. Okay, and they're pretty savvy at doing both. So, but my question is, how many, our deductible of $10,000 seems low to me, unless we have a frequency of claims. If we're seeing 2, 3, 4,000, 2 or 3, 4 claims, property claims a year that exceed the $10,000, then I would say, okay, we're probably going to stay there. However, if we haven't had a property claim in 10 years, we ought to be increasing the deductible and taking, because it is an appreciable savings. We ought to be taking that savings.
I can answer part of that too, because we used to be with co-op 2 years ago.
Right.
And switching from that, we went to a line. Line was the first year. When we were with co-op, our deductible was $2,500. When we went with the line, that was a separate percentage. Save some money, let's move to $10,000. With that, in the last 2 years, since 2014, we've had 2 claims. One was a smaller claim, one was a much larger claim. So those are the number of claims we've had per property since 2014.
So I would certainly, if we've only had 2 claims, in 8 years, I would advocate. And what was the savings? I don't recall.
15,000 to go to a.
$15,000. I would advocate to increase it up to 15,000.
To 25, move it to 25.
I'm sorry, to save the 15,000 and move the deductible to 25,000. It's going to pay for itself in less than 2 years. So if you have one claim in every 2 years, you cover for it. And then also, I know that they've scoured the market looking for cyber liability. If there's any way we can get additional limit on cyber liability, we need to look at that. I can just tell you, I got an email today from one of my colleagues that was out all day on a cyber liability claim on a general contractor, and it's looking like it's going to be over $1 million.
Oh, yeah, usually.
And with the number of records that we have with personal information, we are a city duck. We are a target that. And I know that we're tightening things up with the multi-factor authentication. But I just think that I would take that $15,000 saving on the property level and invest it inside of that. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
We, if I may, just for a moment, we are constantly pushing for more limits. Unfortunately, cyber is extremely tough right now. Your district was very smart last year, taking that 2 million limit. We cannot get that anymore for anyone. So you guys did a good thing doing that, and we were able to keep that 2 million limit in place on cyber. So that's the good news. But we'll continue to push, obviously, when new limits, higher limits become available.
All right.
Good.
Any others? Seeing none, let's move to our second item, the Tri-District Technology Consortium Agreement.
All right, that's right. And so here for any questions on that item, which is a renewal of an existing agreement, is also Cindy as she's walking back. But primarily Christine, our
That's one of the big chores.
that tech. So Chris and or Cindy, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Lord. What we have here is a continuation of the tri-district agreement that was put into place back in 2017. This is word for word the same. During that time, there was a significant amount of vetting. You know that this went through a very rigorous process in all three boards, both among the members of the boards and legal counsel for each of the three districts. We have seen since that time some opportunities for savings between the districts. We've been able to recoup on that, and as we look at long-term plans, this is definitely something that we are looking to leverage as we have opportunities to interconnect with our neighboring districts. And the only things that are changed in this from the last time this went through are the dates. Everything else was found to be very effective as we went through years.
And just also, you did note in the memo, so that savings, not only that we realized approximately with this, but also how that compares to our districts that were in the agreement. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Quick question, Chris. All for efficiencies, that's great. When you talk about pairing with other districts, is this something that would only be applicable to other educational institutions, or is this, I'm just wondering if there are possibilities for technology savings with the library, park district, with other taxing bodies?
Yeah, I'd love to advance that type of agreements, to have facilities at multiple locations throughout the village. And it would definitely be of assistance. This is a great first step, and it's a great model to build from as we look at those opportunities.
So that might be something to IGov to bring forward. So I think noting that, and I don't know if we need some assistance in what it is bringing forth other than a shared opportunity to save money and technology, right?
Bringing Chris in to talk to IGov.
So I think there's merit there. Okay, any other questions on this item? Seeing none, thank you, Chris. And
Thanks for this, Parker. Yes, actually, our next is our Menta contract, and Ms. Parker is here to introduce that item. And I should say, with all the items that you see here, we will be bringing them to the board, pending the results of this conversation for approval at the regular meeting. So, Ms. Parker, you are up for a overview of the Menta contract.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am here presenting the contract for our alternative education provider, which is Menta right now. And I'm here mostly to answer questions, but also to just reemphasize that due to the implementation of our behavior education plan, our alternative learning environment in terms of how we send students has changed. So when you looked at the data that you saw there, the numbers have decreased because of the way we handle students within our building now to try to avoid having to send them out to alternative settings. And so our usage of the program is a little different now in terms of how students get there. So I will answer any questions for you that you have at this time.
trying to find this to me. I don't have the right view here. Okay. I am looking for hands raised on the Zoomers and do not see any. Sarah, did you?
I don't have questions.
Okay. Seeing no questions.
Okay.
I think we are ready for the next item, and I thank you.
Okay, absolutely.
So Tom, my hand is my silly little yellow hand is up.
I see it now. I see you now.
And it's just an easy question. So we have this new board policy that about a year, maybe a year and a half old on whenever contracts come up for renewal, that you provide, that the administration provides some sort of rubric for assessment of the contract. So I'm assuming we haven't done that historically with an arrangement like we have with Menta, but going forward, I would like to see if you guys could, if it's even possible, to have a rubric for reviewing whether or not we as a school district are happy with the provision of these services for very tough situations, and students we obviously want to help out. So that's all I'm asking, is going forward, not now.
Thank you for that, Ralph. And I actually was gonna add, as I was leading out, that I am in conversation with Mensa because I am not pleased with the attendance that our students who are there are demonstrating, as you will see in the documentation. And so I did work out a clause in this contract that if a student is not attending during the time that they're enrolled, that they will be dropped from Mensa and returned back to our school. Because we don't need them to be absent at our alternative site. We would rather have them back at the school to try to provide more services. So that is one piece that's in progress. And then I'm also just working with them around what they're doing to encourage that attendance to happen. Like not just recognizing that they're not coming, but what are we doing to get them in the seats?
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And so, going forward, once again, just trying to get into the discipline of just doing this regularly with contracts that come up for renewal. But this is a sensitive issue with students that need support. And so we want to make sure they're getting the support and things are working the way we want. The students are moving ahead in their academic careers. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Harper. Ready? So the next two items we're going to package together. This is a continuation of contracts for our support services, physical therapists and speech therapists. And so I will turn this over to Ms. Francois Blue for this.
Thank you. Good evening, board. So what you see here are two contracts for contractual services for related services for physical therapists and speech language therapists. One for supplemental health care, which is the vendor, the actual agency or private contractor who provides us with our physical therapist. The additional contract is for Dr. Eileen Brand Speech Services, who provides us with one of our speech language pathologists. At the request of the board, what was included with these two contracted rules was outcome data on that in terms of services rendered, students seen, what was the outcome of those services, and the total number of services, total number of students that were seen by these therapists. So you'll see the contract as one PDF and then the outcome data as an additional attachment. And so additionally, but moving forward, each contract will include outcome data for you to review.
Along with those other items that we end up
Yes.
identifying and pulling together as a result of that board policy and Ralph's comments.
Yes. Any questions?
The outcome data is great.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're really helpful to see that.
Good. Thank you.
Likewise. Your question? Yes.
Obviously, the utilization of this contract is depends on how many of our students need physical therapy services, right?
Yes.
Do you know ahead of time from our other districts? I mean, do they share the information with you, how many students or who may need some specific? And that question could go on to the speech therapist, which is nice, so I don't have to repeat it.
Yes, no, it does. We actually, our transition meetings that we have which are articulation meetings from our teacher schools, D97, D90 of incoming freshmen, our incoming diverse learners, that lets us know at the table with those team members there who have these related services, speech, OT, so we're able to try to project the total number of students and then the total number of staff that we need. And that occurs between beginning of January and towards the middle of March.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Francois Blue, and I'm going to ask if you could just stay there for this next item, just in case.
Okay.
And Ron, if you can come on up. This next one is our ROCC space sharing agreement. This is the Little Forest Community Center, which we use for our site programming. This is a 3-year renewal of the relationship that we've had now for several years. Question almost that. So, Ron, if you could give us a brief introduction to this item.
Yeah, so this is an updated contract based off of, we get a 1-year extension. And that was contingent on us obtaining the private campus. And that didn't happen, so we want to extend this contract because we need to the best interest of the district. To have a place that we have free versus renting or purchasing a facility.
That's right. You know what, I'm gonna add one thing too to that. You see in this contract attached, there are a few paragraphs, sentences in red. And these specifically pertain to our tech arrangements with RFCC. And Chris has been instrumental in identifying this as an area that we want to be a little bit more precise on when we're talking about, working in with our devices, our internet, our email, all that stuff on a different site. So that language is for that purpose. We've been in conversations with RFCC about this item as well. Questions?
I'm looking for hands. No questions? Okay. Okay, to instruction.
All right, thank you both. Thank you. And Chris. Next up is instruction, and we have one item here. It's an update on our multi-tiered systems of support, social, emotional, behavior, and academic. This is an item that we want to provide an update on for the board on an annual basis. And here for this presentation in person is Dr. Faith Cole, and remote is Dr. Gigi Lamb. And so I'm going to turn it over to those two to give us an overview on this approach for this past school year. And our presentation is up. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, I'm at a point of making sure I say that. I almost said newly, but no, we've had a board meeting already.
I got you. I think my son stayed at home too, so thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'm actually here with Dr. Julie Lamb, who is the Director of Student Services. We're going to be speaking this evening about our MTSS supports as it relates to both the academic and the social emotional. So just to give you guys a little bit of a background, as we started the school year, we kind of anticipated that students were going to be coming to us with a level of need that they haven't had in the past. And so this was actually implemented at the end of last year, is that we would have a screener that allowed us to really get a sense of where students' baseline was as it relates to their self-reported behaviors. And so this is determining, how students feel about stressful events, self-management, social awareness, and emotional regulation. And so students are really reporting how they feel and what they feel their capacity is. And the reason this is so important is that we really didn't have a sense of the school around what the need would be at that tier 1 level. We had over 2,000 students that took part in the survey, and it really allowed us again to see where the need is. And so within that, what we were noticing, and kind of as predicted, was that stressful events was definitely an area of concern for our students. And so the reason this information really helps us determine what we collectively as a school need to provide to our students to make sure they feel that they have the strategies and the skill sets in order to make sure that they're able to navigate the different things that are happening. We do also understand that this is going to be something ongoing over the next few years, and that our students aren't going to come back in the fall and be back to their old selves. So we really want to dig in and make sure this is work that we're doing over the next couple of years. So this is something actually that really kind of resonated with our whole MTSS team, is that we asked students, the last question in their screener is, what has been the hardest thing for them right now in their months? And so the way this is set up is that the more often the student writes a word in, the words get larger. And so some of the big things, COVID, schoolwork, college, future, homework, motivation, people, there were a variety of things that were happening, but it's almost like the students are, between, being students, but also dealing with the pandemic and all the other things that were issues. This really let us know kind of where our students' mindset is. With the panoramic screener, our hope is next year, we offered it one time this year, that we would screen students at 2 points next year to really get some additional baseline data. And we're able then to adjust it then throughout the year. Ideally, 3 times a year is really what we hope for, but we also do not want to over survey our students. And we want to make sure that we have enough time to make adjustments once we have that information. In addition, our survey information also lets us know what students need tier 2 supports. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So we know collectively as a school what we need, but then also what supports our students will need. And so with these interventions, we were able to provide those students that were identified within the screener as needing more, as both students that would do a check and connect. And a check and connect is really kind of a personal one-on-one check-in with we call them champions. These students received a weekly check-in. They reviewed grades, how things were going, setting goals with the students, but really allowing a positive interaction with another adult in the building. And so these students were identified based on how they showed up in the panorama screener. And so we supported 197 students in the 6-week program. You can see the demographics of those students. And it's really, between the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, there was a really nice spread. We were fortunate that our counselors, our social workers, our deans were the main champions for this, but we were also able to tap into some other special people within the building. Our hope is to continue to check and connect. We do know there's certain times of the year that our counselors are pretty bogged down, so making sure that we're selecting other champions within our studies to support that. In addition, we did our social emotional skill building, and that was with our social workers. They had a curriculum that they utilized, and students here were identified to work on specific skills that they needed to enhance. And so Check and Connect is more for those kids that have the skills, but just really need a personal connection. Our social emotional skill groups are really for students that are showing that they need additional supports. And so these were the students that were supported. We had 234 students identified, and of that, 138 students participated in one or more group sessions. And these sessions happened during the school day, and we changed the different periods so they weren't missing the same classes. But again, these were students that were identified in our panorama screener. We did have some parents that had opted out of this additional support, really just decided they didn't want their students to miss any class. But we did try to be very flexible, got a lot of good feedback, but oftentimes with social emotional learning, it doesn't show up in the same way that academic supports do. And so we really kind of reap the benefits of this, but it doesn't show up in the same way in the data for a few years. And so we kind of anticipate that. All right, I'm actually going to turn this over to Dr. Lamb for executive functioning and set skills.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to present about the academic MTSS programs. So our first one here is our executive functioning study skills, EFSS, which is a tier 2 academic intervention. And just like you saw in the previous slides, we have the demographic breakdown in terms of race and year in school of the students. And with this program, this tier 2, it focuses, just like the title of the program is, executive functioning. We had 64 students who participated in this tier 2 intervention this year. And also on this slide, you could see that the overwhelming majority of the students had reported wonderful and positive outcomes from being in the program.
Julie, if it would be possible to, a little bit closer to your mic, we're having a hard time hearing you here in the boardroom.
Okay, let me try to turn up my volume as well.
And Julie, when you just want the next slide, you say next slide, not click for you.
Okay, next slide, please. Our next program is Math Enrichment Center, or MEC. It is also a tier 2 intervention, similar to EFSS, but of course this one focuses more on math skills for our students who need that specific support. This year, this program served 39 students. It is a fluid intervention, so students can come and go as they please. And in the conversations with students, many of them who have found themselves to have negative experiences with math have improved over time in this intervention. On this slide, you also see the demographics of the participating students by race and by year in school. Next slide, please. Now we're heading into our tier 3 interventions. This is our most intensive of interventions. The first one being mentor study. This mentor study fuses executive functioning, but also social emotional supports for our students. And this past year, we've had 64 students who participated in this program. Also within this slide, you see the racial and the year in school breakdown of the participants. We also have some highlights here, which focus on some of the student outcomes and their experiences, and also with the additional layer of support from our social workers. Next slide, please. We have another tier 3 intervention here on this slide. This is in collaboration with West 40. We have 2 West 40 student advocates who are on site every day. And this year they worked with 83 students in this program. And in this program, there's goal setting, there's executive functioning support, there's social emotional support, but there's also an additional layer of home to school connections. So on this slide, you also see the number of not only student contacts, but also parent and guardian contacts and outreach, including home visits as well. Next slide, please. In addition to MTSS academic, we also have an additional support called In-School Credit Recovery, ISCR. And this slide shows that in our program, which is taught by a certified teacher, 5 periods throughout the day, we've served 66 students this past school year. And of those 66 students, they have earned 88 credits as well. You see the racial and year in school breakdown. And in this program, we tend to have participants that are more so upperclassmen compared to our underclassmen. Next slide, please. And I think that's actually the end of our presentation.
I just also want to make you guys aware that a lot of times in these supports that students can have multiple supports. So you could have a student that is in a social work group, but then also is in ISCR. There could be a variety of things. And so we do kind of look at the whole child. In some cases, we identify several supports for those students.
Marianne, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cole and Dr. Lam, that was great. I have a question about, I don't know, sort of between tier 1 and tier 2. I sometimes feel like there's maybe a little bit of a gap there because I'm going to speak out of my own experience as someone with ADD. So I take Vyvanse, and when my ADD meds are working, then I can think very clearly and I can stay on top of things, right? But they run out at a certain point in the day, and if I had to do homework at that point, I would be in trouble, right? So, and you can't keep taking them because then they start interfering with sleep, right? So, one of the things I've been hearing from parents of people with ADD or ADHD, type 1, is that the students don't often always realize that they need executive functioning support, right? And they are hesitant to miss classes. Like even if the parents are okay with it, the students feel like they're going to miss. They're already having trouble keeping track of things, and they're worried that if they miss classes, they'll have more trouble keeping track of things, right? And the problem with people who are having executive functioning difficulties, like they're expecting them to be able to identify the problem and advocate for themselves is like inherently going to be very challenging. So my question is, you identify people who need the tier 2 supports, but I'm wondering whether there's a possibility for something in between 1 and 2. And I'm thinking, and I don't know how feasible this would be at all, right? So I'm just throwing it out there. But when I used to teach freshman composition, what we would do as a standard practice was we would cancel a week of classes at the start of the semester and use that time for all of the students in the class to go to office hours and have a 10-minute meeting with the faculty, right? And so what I think is really good about that is it destigmatizes, it teaches the students where your office is, it gets them used to walking in the door. Everyone does it, and so it just makes it all much more accessible. So I guess I'm sort of asking you to explore the possibility of something between tier 1 and tier 2 that might be a support really for all the students, but that would kind of help to figure out, because I think a lot of these students they just need help getting in the door, essentially, right? And then probably they don't need a lot of support after that. They might not need 6 whole weeks even, right? They're just kind of that familiarity and like this is where you go if you need some tools.
No, I think that's great. We're always looking for those kind of entry points with our students, because the ones that really need support are gonna come to the surface right away. One of the great things that counselors do is they do check in with every single student, and they're able, when I say every student, like the freshman students, our social workers check in with all the new freshmen, how it transfers, to kind of look for some of those things that are underlining, but more importantly, kind of start working on a relationship. So no, I love that idea, but again, different kids will show up right away, emailing and say, hey, this is what I need. Other kids, like I said, sometimes don't even know what they need yet. But I think executive function, I think everybody can benefit from that, students, adults, and so I appreciate that feedback.
I would also like to add that in between that tier 1 and tier 2, on the academic side, we do have tutoring services that are available in our student resource center. Sometimes the students attend on their own accord. So they report during their study hall or lunch period. We also have students who come before and after school. Sometimes students do get recommended by their classroom teacher to get tutoring in specific subject areas. Math is a very popular one, but we also have students who seek out help in, for example, proofreading their works of writing as well.
I also want to throw out there, at least for our freshman students, we have Husky Kickoff Day, and we do orient our students to a variety of things that our school offers that aren't readily and visually available to every kid as they're walking through their 1 through 8 schedule. So I know at least naming this, that these experiences are out there for our kids is something that we do, and that we can take a look at Husky Kickoff and find a way to visually put eyes on such things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want the
So it's good.
teachers coming at me with like, you're taking away instructional time, but.
Husky Kickoff Day is
yeah.
perfect for that because it doesn't do that.
Yeah.
So.
That's important, I think, we want to keep this going along, so thank you for that.
Okay.
I think Ralph.
Ralph, yeah, I see Ralph with his hand up, so please.
Yeah, I have 3 questions. 2 are for the future. 1 is for today. So future, I'd like to see longitudinal data on this. So see how demographics and participation by class is changing from year to year to year, just so that we could identify any trends, if in fact there are any. So longitudinal data would be helpful. I don't know if you have for a number of the different interventions. And by the way, I applaud you doing this work. It's best practice. It's great stuff. You guys are rock stars for doing it. So I love that this is what we're doing at our school. So it's all good. I wanted to make sure I get that on the record. If you have some sort of process for evaluating the efficacy of the interventions and reporting on the efficacy, where you feel you're doing great, where you feel you need to improve, where you feel you need additional resources from the board to make you better at your jobs, or to help you get through any implementation issues you're having. So I think that sort of evaluative summary would be great. The only one that has anything kind of like that in this report was on the in-school credit recovery. And this is just, so 88 credits were earned. I think that's fantastic. Out of how many possible credits that those kids could have earned. I'd like to know that. And so you probably don't have that data in front of you, but if we know it's 88 out of a possible 99, that sounds pretty good. If it's 88 out of a possible 250, maybe we need to be doing something else. So just knowing those numbers and that data would give us more context and allow us to understand better how the program's working. But once again, thrilled we're doing this. It's great stuff. I appreciate your efforts and thank you for all you do.
I think one of the things that we made a recommendation in the board report was having this would be something that we would typically present in August. It would give us some time then to look at the end of the year data and really kind of cross-reference it to see if we're seeing some of that impact within that space.
Fred?
Yes, thank you for this report in this work. And I have just a couple comments and maybe a question or two. When I look at this, well, the first thing I'd like to say off the bat is this check and connect. Frankly, I think that every student in this school ought to have a champion, an adult champion. I think they need it. Somebody they can check in with, somebody that they trust. I think the fact that you surveyed over 2,000 kids is great. but there's still another, well, 1,400 that didn't get surveyed, so they may be the kids that need it the most. And just, when I look at, okay, 64 executive functioning students, I think that's a low number, frankly. I think that is probably 10% of the kids that need it, or 20 or 5% of the kids that need it. It's I can just say anecdotally for the kids that I worked with, they all need it. All you have to do is open any one of their backpacks, and their backpacks look like my desk. So I just think, and the other thing that I'm concerned about too with the executive functioning, all right, is when they're exposed, after they're exposed to the skills, all right, what about reinforcement and follow-up? Okay, do they get? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I thought we talked about actually some of these executive functioning skills being brought into and introduced in actual classroom situations in classes, and I can't remember, but I didn't write it down, but I think that was, I think the more reinforcement they get, obviously, the more mastery of it they will obtain, because I think, especially moving into next year with our revised curriculum for freshmen, those kids are going to need it. And I just, I love that we offer these. I would just like to see a much larger, size of our student body taking advantage of it, because I think there's many more kids that need it, and we need to be proactive with our students in terms of the supports they need. And just when we see something manifest, we got to nip it in the bud. Gotta get to them. All right, and get them on one program or another, so it doesn't get too far down the line. Hello.
Howard,
Good.
say two very quick things. This is being embedded into the freshman curriculum.
That's what I thought.
Teachers spend 2 days at the very end of the school year crafting and coming to agreement on 5 executive functioning practices. So they will do that in common across all of those subjects. And the last thing I would say is that MTSS is tiered. So Mr. Martieri is correct in we need to make sure that we are shoring up tier 1, which is universal, making sure all students are instructed well at the beginning in a thing, so that then as the 66 or 80 students sort of bubble to the top, we can grab them in a tier 2 intervention before it requires anything further. So that is in fact what Dr. Lamb and Dr. Kohler put in place. So it will work very well next year.
Thank you.
Is that Fred?
Yeah.
Sarah?
Hi, how are you? So, having come from District 97, you are the right person, I think, for this. But I'm just curious as to, I feel like the sooner we can sort of help students, obviously, the more effective it can be in later years. So, is there any thought, because I know it's a lot to ask, and we ask a lot of our administrators, I get that, about trying to coordinate some of this with District 97 so that it's all sort of like, like a wave that kind of rolls as it needs to for students.
And actually, fortunately, because I know a lot of the principals over there, we've actually had started talking about this probably about 2 summers ago. Because I do think the pandemic really exposed that lack of executive functioning for a lot of our students that weren't getting the same teacher touch as they had in the past. And so we have talked a little bit about what we're going to be doing here. And so Dr. Lorenzo just shared that, but I'm kind of keeping them abreast of this is what we're doing. But we know a lot of this work has to begin in late elementary. I mean, it has to start in 4th, 5th grade. And so with them knowing what we're doing and kind of what the focus is on, particularly those 5 points, it's something that definitely the middle schools can have, because then if they can start working on that, that's just going to make what students are getting here even stronger. And they want to help. I think it's just when they have some direction, I think they're all for it. So I absolutely agree with that. And they kind of know that some things are coming, coming back to them so that they can continue working on that. Thank you for that feedback.
One thing, just jumping off the both of the things you said, or just a question first, this 5-point thing, is it for the freshmen or for everyone?
Freshmen.
So I might suggest if it's possible to expand to the sophomores, because the sophomores, because of the pandemic, they came into school having had a year remote, and then, and so I just feel like they're particularly, not just the lack of teacher touch, but also like the routines. They're really under-equipped in practicing the routines of keeping track of stuff, right? So just pile more work on your desk, something to consider.
I had a couple comments and one question. First comment is, just as you recently acquired your new title, my daughter, who looks up to you as an educator, Jennifer, acquired a new title this week as mom. So, she's always admired you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my God, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
The second is this, having seen this over a longer period of time, and Sarah's been too, I mean, it's positive to see the discipline and structure and rigor that is going into this. This is not just kind of this, there's science here of how to make this work. So I'm thankful to have seen it. Well, I guess not from a sense of disarray to a sense of being organized, but it has certainly progressed. And I'm very positive about the energy and effort and direction. So thank you for that. My question is, one, as I looked at the data set and the different, looking at the distribution between the different grades, right? For each one of them, they were all very different. And I'm wondering, what would we want? And is it the same for all? Do we want equal distribution? Do we want everyone to come in as a freshman and see it dwindle? Or is there any desired, or is it just data?
So I think it's a good question. So depending on the program, so like for ISCA, for instance, the credit recovery for our, let's say our freshmen or sophomores that fail a course, we're not going to necessarily go that route with them. What we might do is like a summer school course or have them retake the class. And so we're typically going to see that for our students that are in the upper grades. For some of the other things like mentor study, West 40, it's really going to be based on the student. And so some years we're going to see where it's equally across all grade levels. Other times we're going to see where it's going to be spiked, just kind of dependent. And so with West 40, some of those we really try to get the intervention as quickly as possible. But we also have to have a good parent relationship, because West 40 is really like this wraparound support. So if we like day one come in and say, hey, we have this great person that can come to your house and do all these things, it's going to scare some of our families away. And so there are certain supports here that we would like to really introduce a little bit early, but we want to build that relationship first with our families. And some of them we propose it, they're not comfortable yet, we come back at a later time. And so it's really based on where the need is, and then those parents, those families that accept that service as well. But you will see a bit of a fluctuation. My thought is, it doesn't necessarily matter to me if it's what grade level is heavy or what grade level, how it's distributed, just making sure that we are touching as many students as we can. And it's not a situation where it's like, hey, your parent requested this, so now you're going to be in that program. It's really data-based. And so the information I have is able to stand behind and say, this is an appropriate program for you because of this information, not because somebody reached out or somebody really likes somebody. We want to make sure the students that are getting the support are the ones that really need it.
Thank you. Yeah, and it actually kind of ties to what because Sarah was talking about how do we bridge it between 97 so that we can have more continuity going in, and then Ralph's point about tracking things. So thank you. Recording this now.
And what we did this year was we took the data at the end of the year, and we have already put the students into their support, like the ones that we were able to identify supports work. We'll start at the beginning of the year, as opposed to us waiting like the 6 or 7 weeks, waiting for the new information. We're like, they're ready to go. We already know the students that, and we're going to hit the ground running with them, which is a new practice.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb.
So when I got my doctorate, my dad started addressing all his letters to me, Dr. Raj. It's hilarious.
I'm telling you, even I get a wedding invite, I was like, Dr. Cole and Mr. Cole. He's like, don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, do that.
Absolutely.
So, next up on our agenda is our final item. It's a policy item, and we're really happy to bring this forward for, not really an official first read according to the process we have for policies, but for an initial discussion before it goes to that first read. We're bringing forward the sustainability policy. This has been the product of committee work throughout the past school year, and I'm really excited to be able to bring this here as our kind of first final draft of the policy, knowing that there's a lot of work left to do toward making this thing a integrated part of how we function in the school. So, Ron, you chaired that committee. You led that throughout this past school year. So, go ahead and take it away.
I'd like to first thank Tom, Sarah, the students that were involved, Cindy Wong, and also Gary Coonan, who was very strong on this as well, because none of them ever missed a meeting, so it was great to have the collaboration. And this is something that we worked on and we came up with that would, as we discussed, would probably replace the policy 470, which was a precursor to sustainability. That was sustainability before sustainability policy was available. And we look to bring forward topics within the policy that will cover energy resources, non-energy resources, the education and curriculum part of it, and also purchasing. So if you review the policy, I'd like to take any questions that you have about the policy.
Okay, one question. I love that you're including sustainability topics in the curriculum. I think that will go a long way towards actually getting the students to notice, as opposed to like having pamphlets and signs around school, whatever else. I'm guessing that the science teachers and so on are probably already doing a lot of that.
That's right.
And I just want to be sure, speaking for English, that the English teachers don't fall behind on their, I think it's not probably been a priority for them, but there are some great texts like Paulo Bacigalupi's Shipbreaker is a great young adult, eco text and so on. So it's, has science fictional fantastical elements that I think it's very popular with high schools. And so I guess I hope that this happens across the curriculum and not just in the sciences, as I guess before.
Okay, absolutely, and I appreciate the challenge to our English teachers. So, thank you.
Also, following the policy, we have the plan, which would help us implement the policy. The policy is just foundation, but the plan will help us get there.
Ron, could you talk just a little bit about the process for creating I feel like we've got the policy for the process for the plan. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how you think that'll look next year? Because I know students have been really central to all of this, right?
Yes.
And hopefully will continue to be so. Unfortunately, some are graduating, but how are we do you have a sense of how that's gonna look at? It's not meant to put you on the spot. If you don't, that's okay too.
No, within you saw the amended policy that's inside of board now. We have goals. So within those goals, that will guide us. Obviously, they're embedded inside the policy as well, but we'll have multiple scorecards, and those type of things will guide us. We'll first have to create the plan. We have multiple meetings between now and August to create the plan that will guide us. But it would take some time to implement it within the curriculum because the curriculum is already set for next year. So that plan would lead us in that process.
Yeah. I have some comments I'll make, but I just any questions before I can.
While we're pausing just for a second, Tom, can I throw one other thing out there? there's a reference earlier, you made a reference to policy 470. And right now, we aren't exactly sure whether this will replace 470. And if it does, whether it will require some revisions in order to make sure that we are definitely in sync with state code and what really is best practice for that policy, or if this sustainability policy will have a separate number in and of its own right. So we're in the process of trying to figure that out. By the time we're able to bring this back to the board for the actual process for adoption, we hope to have that answer really that answer for everybody. So yeah, that's all. I just want to make it clear. This this will shift a little bit as we make the transition to actual board policy.
Yeah, I think that's a key decision before it gets put. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
My comments are this. First of all, you mentioned, but I mean, our students did some heavy lifting in researching what other policies are, et cetera. And there's no one, there's different ways, there's policy and plans, but I want to recognize their efforts and passion. And in this policy, it specifically says that students will need to be part of its ongoing effort. So when I look at a policy, the question is, how do we know we're adhering to this policy? And I'm just going off of mine. So we're adhering to this proposed policy if we do the following things. One, if we develop and bring forth a plan that is really the detail of what we're going to be doing. So that's one, and that has a date of August, and is well underway, and is the meat of the matter. The second, again, to adhere to it is that annually there is a presentation to the board on progress of that plan, and students are part of that activity. So it's kind of keeping the students engaged. So if we do that, we've adhered to the plan. And then the third, and then there's all the detailed subsegments, but those are just the plan. And then the third is that there be the purchasing, that there be policy built around sustainable purchasing. So those are, as I look at it, to keep it simple, those, if we say, are we following policy, that's what we need to do to follow what is being proposed here. Okay.
Also, I'd like to add that we'll have multiple committee meetings throughout the year with students involved, and we'll enter multiple contests. I received an email from the Illinois Green School Association, who we won the first place prize with. They have a national competition that's coming up that they were impressed with the participation from this year. They would like us to enter as well. So we would like to continue to compete with students and school districts across the nation to be the best that we can be.
And I believe, weren't we donated some solar panels?
21 solar panels.
Okay, so one of the issues, I'm just going to kind of bridge a prior discussion where, there was a proposal to actually, from a capital, to do some things, and the proposal in part was driven for the need to have something that our students can learn from. And so through the work Ron and others are doing, we've actually got donations of those, and there's kits. There are things that are being given to us, or we can have, that our students can use, touch, feel, and become, adept at what solar is, how it works. So it's all good stuff, rather than just, saying we're going to build a building to do that. So.
I don't know whether you're planning to include anything about gardening or anything like that in here, but the garden groups are very eager to donate native plant materials to schools that are trying to set that kind of thing up. So I think resources will be made available if you end up including that as part of the plan.
We actually have a native garden that was part of the competition, and the students plant the plants. So we have to check on them, but that was part of the plant, the national competition, and they also had pictures of it. That was inside of the article that was written by the university.
So the next step for this is what?
The next step for this is to bring it, is to resolve the one remaining item, the 470 versus whether this be a new number or not. And as soon as we have that down, bring that to the board as
first read.
for first read.
Under its, in its official slot.
In its official slot, like we do other policies, and it'll run through that sequence.
Correct.
Yeah, so thank you again, Ryan. I'm gonna say one more thing that I neglected earlier, and I apologize. This was a board goal for this past school year. So Sarah, in your turn as board president, you know, you made sure this was something that we wanted to drive forward. So I want to officially thank you too for having the vision for the board to drive it. So anyway.
I'm sorry, I do have one question, if I could just back us up for 1 second. So we're gonna be talking about, you know, a second facilities, large scale facilities project, et cetera. And we have some pretty lofty, but I think achievable goals that are embedded in here. This is sort of the final form. I assume that when we're going out to bid, I mean, some of this will need to be built into our bid documents too, right? To make sure that we're sourcing sustainable materials and, you know, if we're gonna actually achieve these goals. So I'm assuming all of that is going to be happening and just sort of raising it generally.
Yeah, Ron, I don't know, do you want to chime in on that? I could quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
How about it?
In short, yes, and that speaks right to the 470 board policy topic. There's language in 470 about how you want to bid and so on and so forth, and that needs to get resolved so that we ensure that the sustainability policy actually has, you know, teeth in the organization. So
Yeah.
So,
And like, you know, like I said, sort of some of the greenhouse gas emission reduction, et cetera. I mean, we're gonna, I think, have to be really, really clear in our mission here in order to achieve those. So I think it's great. So thank you. And thank you to our students, and thank you, Ron, for all of your work.
Well, and I know FDM being part of that committee is, you know, hearing all this and is kind of factoring it in and providing feedback. So I think that's all. All right, with that said, that concludes the regularly scheduled program. We have future items, and you wanted to provide an update of one item.
yes.
Is that?
Yes, and I'll be very brief with this. I just want to inform the board that we were originally working on the understanding that this is specific to the field renovation project that we presented and talked about here in public several times. We have previously been operating on the understanding that the special use amendment for the south field that allows the lights there to be on until 8 o'clock currently, which simply need to be amended through the village, and that would allow, at least for, that would be like one of the last hurdles for us to clear as we move forward with this project. Because we are talking about not merely changing that time though, because we're talking about taking down those light poles and adding new additional poles at a different height and so forth, it's not really an amendment, it's actually a new application for the special use permit. And that's going to take a little bit more time than we had originally allocated to get this done. It doesn't change as we are mapping it out right now, the overall timeline for construction and completion of this project. But previously we had communicated out roughly a June idea for bringing a final IGA and maybe and actually the price for approval for the board for this project, so that we can go out to bid. We're looking at something that's probably going to go a little bit later in the summer, maybe a July meeting, but possibly getting into August as well. We're trying right now to work on ensuring that us doing that process will not get in the way with the time that we have to get the work out to bid to ensure that we can get it completed in time. And I think we can resolve that, but I just want to be clear that we will not be bringing that topic to the board as we originally discussed at the late June meeting. And to be a little bit more specific than I previously was, the key thing is we need to do a light illumination study on the new plans, and doing that study is going to take a little bit of time before we can do that special use permit. So hopefully that was little clearer than opaque, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Just a supplemental piece of information on that question, because there's also a discussion about meeting with the village. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, on June 21st, I suppose that's 95% certain at this point, so not too long away. Both the executive director of the Park District, Jan Arnold, and I, and some others, I'm sure, from both groups, will be just giving an overall update to the village board, presenting to the village board on this topic. We've been asked to do so in etiquette. And so this is just to make sure that any questions they might have about what we're aiming to do in the South Fields and why a new special use permit might be is needed can be answered there with them directly. So again, June 21 is the date for that. Thanks for that, promise.
Okay. Question, Fred?
No, this, just a quick question about this light study.
Yeah.
Is that done by FGM, or we have to bring in a specialty engineering company?
No, it's is Ron out of the room? Hi, Ron. Amoresco, I think.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we will have to contract out through, but it will be through FGM to get it done. Yeah.
And they can do it on an expedited basis.
Yeah, so we're figuring out exactly what that timeline is. We spent the last 2 or 3 days really trying to nail down a really tight timeline, and it's just not perfected yet. But everybody involved in this understands the urgency, right?
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we do have new business, future item, agenda items, and on the agenda, does anyone have any future agenda items? All right, seeing none.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All uncertain? Okay. We will now flip right into a special board meeting, right?
That's right.
That has action, so same Zoom, everything, we're going, we're just gonna.
Just come sit next to me. Can't do it. Got an 9 o'clock tour, so.
Yeah, you know, I'm seeing it all there. Okay, I call to order the special board meeting at 8:45 PM. Where are you? At the, in the boardroom of OPRF. Please, may I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Henry.
Here.
Mr. Martieri.
Here.
Ms. Spivey.
Here.
Dr. Maharaj. Here. Mr. Arkin.
Here.
Mr. Costi.
Yes, here. Do we have any public comment?
None.
Okay, our action item, I move to approve the personnel report, including new hires, transfers, assignment changes, end of temporary assignments, summer hires, and resignation.
Second.
Any discussion? May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Martieri.
Yes.
Ms. Spivey.
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Arkin.
Yes.
Mr. Henry.
Yes.
Mr. Costi.
Yes. Are there any future agenda items for this section? Seeing none,
Motion
I second.
to adjourn, Tom.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Here. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Hey, man.